Our retro review for Star Trek The Original Series, A Private Little War, after this. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and this episode was written by Gene Roddenberry. Not very many of them were. He didn't come up with the original concept for it, but his rewrite ended in more of an allegory to Vietnam than the original written script was. And this is not the first time that Star Trek would try to normalize the role of the United States in Vietnam. They did it in the Enterprise incident, and they also did it this time in A Private Little War. And the Klingons have always been kind of a stand-in during the original series of Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time. And, of course, the Federation was the United States, essentially. And in this case, we find a planet that Kirk had visited 13 years ago as a lieutenant, apparently on the Farragut, in which he did his first planetary survey as a lieutenant, and actually spent some time with the hill people there and got to be friends with Tyree, who has since become chief. Now, because of that, of course, they have taken this routine survey this time where they're just looking for useful medical herbs and things such as that to find that one side is armed with flintlocks. This is far ahead of their development, and yet they were a peaceful people the last time that Kirk encountered them. Before long, we found that the Klingons were involved. And so what we have is this Vietnam allegory where the Klingons are supplying the village people, and the Federation is supplying the hill people. And this is very much the way Vietnam worked. The Soviets were supplying the North Vietnamese, and U.S. interests were supplying the South Vietnamese, and in fact contributing troops to it. And with that became what seemed like an endless war. It did go on for quite a long time, and certainly was in some of its heaviest fighting during the time that Star Trek was in its second season. So, they decide, despite the fact that Star Trek had always had kind of a liberal tilt, to take the pro-war side and basically explain to the audience the balance of power. It's not fair if you have one side supplying one side unless you have another side supplying the other. And so the balance of power is kept as long as both sides are equally armed. And there are some people who even fought in Vietnam that were not real happy with this idea that you had to keep it such a parity that really neither side could win, that they would just fight forever. And this is something that McCoy brought up in the argument. He said, the way you're doing this, it's just going to keep on and never stop. Now, of course, as with most wars, eventually one side basically gets tired of fighting or loses popular support to the point to where they just withdraw. And that's what happened to the United States during the Vietnam era. That's what happened to the British during the Revolutionary War. They basically got tired of fighting and gave up. And always the other side claims that that was a win. Now, we have another thing that kind of dates this episode, and of course, it's the attitude toward women. The Magutu woman, who is Tyree's wife, is kind of a witch doctor and a conniver. She wants power, and she wants to have power through him, and she put a spell on him so they would marry her, and keeps him kind of stirred up with various roots and herbs that she has. Even got Kirk under the spell in order to be able to take his phaser away from him and use that to try to be on the winning side of whatever. She was willing to join either side. And thankfully, she didn't know how to actually shoot the phaser, and unfortunately died as a result. But this is somewhat of the story that they were trying to tell, that war is okay as long as both sides are even and that one side doesn't overtake the other one. I'm not really sure what kind of sense that makes. Certainly McCoy didn't think that it made any sense. And that was just the times that we were living in in the late 60s. So does it survive into modern times? Yeah, I don't think so. That's the story of a private little war. And like I say, not the first time that we had a Vietnam allegory in the episode. Another thing, introduction of Dr. Mbenga. We, of course, have seen him in Strange New Worlds, and his exchange with Nurse Chapel is kind of interesting because it does kind of fit in with the relationship that he had with her in Strange New Worlds when she's holding holding Spock's hand and puts it down when she hears the doctor coming, and the doctor makes some remark that he's aware of you holding your hand. And with the backstory that we have right now, it kind of fits. So there's interesting things of knowing things from now that have been inserted into the backstory of that, and it fits pretty well. It was very controversial at the time that it was telecast because there were very strong feelings pro and anti-war, and it was difficult to reconcile. Most families had someone who was fighting the war. My brother did. And there are legitimate differences of opinion as to whether we should have been involved or not, but how the war was fought was something that was fairly agreed on later on, that probably the incrementalism in which kept that going for so long probably wasn't any way to fight a war. But I digress from a television show. I'd like to know what you think about it, and I look forward to your comments below. Also, if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. We look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, we're gonna start on Friday. We're going to start our reviews of Babylon 5. We hope you'll be with us on that. Until then, don't go far.